The tech topic is about sharing photos in cloud albums. You may or may not have ever created a cloud album, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to try and do a few things there, and we'll talk about what's involved in sharing photos. I'm going to explain why you may want to start looking into using them if you have not used them yet. I'm going to go through explaining how they work, and then I'm going to show you examples. I have them all installed as an app on Apple's cloud, Google's cloud, and Microsoft, and we'll see what's involved in creating an album on each of those and then sharing the album. You can have private albums, but we're going to talk and focus on shared albums today. So let me explain why some things might work here before we get into our demonstrations. So why would you want to use cloud photo storage? Well, one of the main reasons you'd want to use cloud photo storage is to be able to give yourself the ability to do a few things that might be helpful for you, like accessing your photos from anywhere. With cloud photo storage, your photos are sent to the cloud, whether you're using Apple, Google, or Microsoft, and Microsoft's cloud is OneDrive, and Samsung users use the gallery, which actually stores your photos in a Microsoft OneDrive location. But you can get to your photos from anywhere, from whether it's on your smartphone, whether it's on your laptop or PC, or whether it's on a tablet. So you have the ability to access them wherever you can get on the internet, and they're also synchronized across all of your devices as well, so that you see the same photos everywhere. That's one of the benefits of cloud photo storage. Another benefit is that they're really backed up automatically. In addition to your having a copy in your cloud account at one data center, your data center provider, the cloud provider like Apple and Google and Microsoft, they have multiple data centers and they make redundant backups of your account so that you actually have a built-in backup automatically whenever you store photos in the cloud. So that's why cloud photo storage is becoming more and more popular, rather than just keeping your photos on your phone or on your computer or on your tablet, as opposed to uploading them to the cloud. Cloud albums are photo albums that organize a collection of photos. So many of you may remember a photo album. You might still have some on your shelves where you have actual print photos that are organized into albums. And at one time, people were really good, but as we took more and more photos, and particularly with digital photos, it becomes time-consuming to organize all those photos. But albums give you the ability to organize a collection of photos. So if you're looking for photos about a particular place or person or trip, now some of the cloud photo tools automatically will help you recognize people, and they'll create some automatic albums for you of places, of events. But if you want to organize your own collection, there's a real benefit to understanding how to create an album in the cloud. And the only difference between a cloud album and an album in your Photos app is that the cloud album is available to you in your cloud photo account. So it's available for you to see anywhere you want to, and it's backed up. You can make albums of events, of places, of trips, things that you might not have thought about, but organizing your photos into a collection makes it easier for you to go to particular kinds of photos. Because I do it, and I'm sure some of you do it, where you want to show somebody a photo and you're scrolling through a whole, set of photos you have in your photo app, and it's difficult sometimes to find the photos you want to show somebody. So organizing albums is really a useful tool for getting your photos together. Now, cloud albums are simply albums that sit up in the cloud. As I mentioned, they have collections of photos. They're kind of like folders. Instead of calling photos in albums a folder, they use the term album because it relates back to kind of the historical way we thought about organizing photos. We didn't organize photos in file folders so much like we do with documents. We tend to organize photos in what we called photo albums, and they just kept the same terminology in the cloud as opposed to calling. But essentially, it's a set of photos together in one specific album, and you could consider an album and a folder the same thing, but photo apps use the term album as opposed to folder. They can be shared so that if you have an album of photos in the cloud, you can give people access to view those photos or share their photos with you with an email or a link that you can get from the album that gives them a web link that they can click on and go to the photos. Because these photos are in the cloud, and if it's in the cloud, it's on the internet, and anything on the internet can be shared if the application allows you to do it. And Apple and Google and Microsoft all allow you to share an album with an email, by sending an email to someone and inviting them, or by giving people a link to that album because they create a link for you, just like it would be a link to a web page. So it's pretty cool. It's all built in. It doesn't cost you anything extra other than what you might have to pay if you're storing a lot of photos and you just need more storage space for your photos. Now, this is a little bit about how it works. You're basically storing your photos in the cloud. You have a photo, a photo, a photo, a photo. And if you took them with your phone, they typically would have a timestamp, and they might have a location from the GPS setting in your Photos app, but they're all just going up to the cloud and getting synced with your devices. As you take photos, they are automatically being transferred up to your cloud account. So you have all these photos. Apple iCloud, Google Photos, and Microsoft OneDrive, Samsung Gallery all allow you to do this. So they're all pretty much the same in how they work. An album is just an album of photos in the cloud. It's just that collection of stuff that you've created. And you can create that album and as many of them as you want and add photos to it from your photos in the cloud. When you want to create an album, you basically tap some setting on your device. Usually it's indicated by a plus button or a create or add or something like that. There's different little nomenclature between the three different services. But you create an album and then you add photos to it while you're looking at your cloud collection. And those photos then become part of your album. Then you can share your album and invite others to view it. So you might have an album that you share with people where you allow them to view it, and you can set permissions. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So people can either view it, or you can give them the ability to add photos to that album if you want to. And we'll talk about why you might want to do that. So you have this public album or album that you're sharing, not really public. It depends on how you invite people. But you also have photos in your own private albums, and then photos that just aren't in albums. You can set the permissions for what people can see by album or even by individual photo, but albums are really useful for this. And then you have the shared album, and you have a private set of photos that no one will ever see in the cloud. So your cloud can have both private information that only you see and shared photos that you allow others to see or view if you want to. But the album does give you the ability to allow other people to add photos to it. So say you're at an event where you're on a trip with 3 or 4 people and you want to share the photos you've taken of a particular location. This is a situation where a shared photo album in the cloud comes really useful, because if other people have taken photos and you want to share all the photos that the group has taken on that trip, by creating a shared photo album, you can give them the ability to add their own photos to the album, and then it'll be shared among everybody that has permissions to do that. So it's basically like giving everybody access to a shared photo album, just like you'd have any type of item you'd want to share with them. And you can share it by specific person, or you can share it with a link that anybody can view and make it public if you wanted to as well. And we're going to talk about those because those are some of the more complicated settings to be aware of. They all work a little differently. I'm going to go through Apple, we're going to go through Google, we're going to go through Microsoft. Apple, you invite people to your shared photo album by the Apple ID. If they have an Apple ID, you can set permissions and give them the ability to view the photos in the album, or you can give them the ability to view and add photos to the album. So you have a choice when you invite them, and Apple makes it pretty easy to invite by Apple ID. If somebody doesn't have an Apple ID and you want to invite them to look at the album, the other option that Apple gives you is to use what's called a public website, which means you create a web link from the album and you give it to anyone that you want to have see the album. The problem is it's a public website. It does give anybody that has the access to the link the ability to view those photos. So it doesn't really have a privacy feature if you use that. So Apple ID is the way you can really control it with Apple shared photo albums. Google works a little bit similarly. With Google, you can invite them by Gmail account. Everybody with a Gmail account can be given access to view only or view and add. So it's very similar to Apple's approach, where they have an Apple ID. Your Gmail account basically acts as a Google ID for your photos. Or you can use a link, which is very similar to what Apple does, where you're basically creating a link to an album, and people that have the link can view that album as well. So Apple and Google work very similarly. Either it's public or it's invited by Gmail or Apple ID. So you may have seen or thought about a challenge here. What if I use Google Photos, but my friend doesn't have a Gmail account? How do I invite them to view and add photos? Well, you can't. It's not possible. You have somebody that took photos with an iPhone, they use a Samsung or another Android phone, and they don't have an Apple ID. You can't invite them. So there are drawbacks to both Google Photos and Apple Photos. And they do that because they want to get you to do it with other people that have Apple phones. And so if you have somebody in your group and one person doesn't have an Apple phone, it creates a little bit of peer pressure. Same thing with Google. If somebody doesn't have a Gmail, it gives a little peer pressure. Create that Gmail so you can give more control over what people can do, and only the people that are invited by Gmail or by their Apple ID would be able to see that album. So it's a very good way to control privacy. Microsoft works a little bit differently. They use the OneDrive service, which now has photos. And Microsoft has revamped their OneDrive app on both Android and iPhone, and they look virtually identical. You can invite by email for somebody to see a album in your OneDrive photos, and you can give them view-only permissions or view and add permissions. You can also set an expiration date for when they won't be able to see those photos anymore, or you could also require a password as well. So a lot of this is because OneDrive is using the same permissions tools for photos as it's using for folders of documents. And so they have a lot more permissions built into that than the Apple Photos or Google Photos have. So, and you just need to invite them by email. It doesn't matter where their email is. It doesn't matter if it's a Yahoo email or a Google email or an Apple email. It gives you a lot of flexibility to invite people. The other thing you can do is you can also share a link. And even by sharing a link, you can set permissions to view it only or to view and add, to set an expiration date or a password. So it doesn't matter whether using a link with OneDrive or inviting by email with OneDrive. So OneDrive, in my opinion, gives you the most flexibility in inviting people and giving permissions to them in terms of how they can use it. You're not locked into an Apple ID. You're not locked into a Gmail account, although a lot of people have Gmail accounts. You can invite anybody regardless of their email service they use and the type of connection they have, and they can get to that album and see it anywhere. So one of the unique things I kind of discovered in doing the research for this class that surprised me that I wasn't aware of with OneDrive Photos. Let's kind of review sharing with users, because I think you might all understand there's photos in the cloud, and if you build an album, you're creating essentially a folder of specific photos in the cloud, and it's the sharing of that album that's something that's new, perhaps, that you might not have thought about, or maybe you haven't created albums either before, but you can create a private album or you can create a shared album. Sharing with users works like this, where with Apple, you can do it and you can set view only and view and add if they have an Apple ID. By users, I mean, do they have an account with that service? Okay, so Apple ID users can be set up so that you can invite them to view the album or invite them to view the album and add photos to the album. Google Photos works virtually the same way. You can invite people with Gmail accounts. They can be invited to just view the album, or they can be invited to view and add photos to the album. And OneDrive works essentially the same way. If people have a Microsoft account, that's great. But what's different is with a non-user. With Apple, you can invite people to view the album, but you can invite them only to view it. And it's actually public with the link. With Google, you can invite them to view the album, and it's also with a link, but it's open to anybody. With Microsoft, you can invite them to view it, or you can invite them to view and add, and you can either do it with a link or with a email, and it doesn't matter what email. So OneDrive is the most flexible photo sharing tool if you want to start sharing albums with people that have a lot of mixed environments. It's kind of an interesting approach that they're taking with it. And we're going to try and look at each of these just so you understand the basics of setting up albums and setting up shared albums, and we'll add a few photos for each of these, and I'll create 3 separate shared albums for these. So the main thing I like about OneDrive is that you can share non-users. People don't have to have a Microsoft account, and you can give them permissions not only to view, but also to view and add. Whereas Google and Apple, you don't have that ability. That may change, but right now, as of now, that's the way they're set up. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to Apple Photos. Apple Photos is right in the middle of my home screen here. If I just tap on that, it brings up Photos. Now, what you see is on the top, a little search icon. You see a select icon. And then below that, you'll see the photos in order here. But what I want to create is an album. So I will see some albums that I already have. And some albums are created automatically, like People and Pets and Places and Pin Collections and Memories. But if I tap on Albums, it brings up a list of albums. So that's the important thing. Tapping on this Albums menu item with the arrow to the right of it brings up a new list of items. These are albums I have. I have personal albums. I have shared albums, and it gives me a little history of my activity, what I've shared. So I have it. And there's a create button at the top. So this Backroads is an album that I have of a Backroads bike trip. This family is actually a folder with 10 separate albums in it. So you can put multiple albums in a folder. These are some different albums that I have with different topics that I have. And so I've organized photos into albums already to make it easier for me to find them. And these albums show up just in this list here. So if I scroll to the right, it's just a duplicate of that list. Instead of being in a list, it's on my home screen. Okay, so that's where we start. Now, in order to create a shared album, we would tap on the shared button here at the top. And that shows me a list of shared albums that I have, that I've shared with at least one other person, or by an Apple ID, or invited by giving them a link. I'm going to tap on Create, and that gives me the ability to create a new album. and I can give it a name. I'm going to call it Tech Topic. Then I can add photos to it, and it brings up my photo items. It'll also say videos. I was at the Hollywood Bowl recently for a concert for the 3rd of July. They had their fireworks there. So I just want to add a few photos here, and I can search my library if I want to, but I've got it added here. I'm just going to add those photos to the album. So that's the album. I could stop now, but here's where I can start to add participants. So if I wanted to add a participant, like I'm going to add myself here and with my Gmail address, and I can continue to add participants from my contact list, or just enter names and it will help me. And I can just tap done. And now I have added that to people, and I've invited. I will get an email, and the email will be sent from Bob Cohen, bob@bobology.com, to this email address if I want to. Then I can create the album, and it publishes it. Oh, here's my shared album here on top. So there's my album. I can see what photos are in it, and I have the ability to modify it if I want to. I can add more photos to it. I can share it in a different way by tapping on that share button. I did that fast, so I'm going to tap on this again. I go to the 3 dots, which is called an ellipse. I tap on that. If I tap the share icon here, I have the ability to share this as an email to people or as a message to people, and they can be invited to view this whatever they want to. And I have options here where I can choose it, and I can include the ability to include all data or just some data. So those are some of the tools that you can use from Apple's sharing function here. All right, that's Apple's tools. If I wanted to make this a shared album with a link, I can share it by tapping on this share button, and it usually will give me an option to create a link. Creating albums is easy. If you wanted to create an album that was private, you just stay on personal and it's not shared. But you can take any album that you create and share it with people at any time you want to. So it's a great way to build collections of things that you want to get to very quickly. And then if you decide to share it at some point, you can, but you don't have to from the start. So let's go to OneDrive. And in OneDrive, I have 2 buttons here, one for photos and one for files. The photos will show you your gallery, and that's what Samsung calls them. And we have a button for albums and something you can mark as favorites. The albums tool gives you the ability to create an album. You would just tap the plus button here at the bottom, and that gives you the ability to create a new album. We're going to call this Tech Topic. It's in my OneDrive folder and not in my Apple, so it's a completely different location. It creates the album, and now I can choose, do I want to share my album? And I can share it by inviting people or copying the link. And it also gives me the ability to send it through Outlook or WhatsApp or message without me having to create and copy the link. So I could invite people that are Gmail users or copy the link and give people access to it that way. And I have I have a setting here that gives me the ability so I can set a password, and I have a premium OneDrive account, so it does give me some options to set an expiration date and a password for it if I want to. You may not be able to do that with a free account. If I wanted to add photos to this, I would go back here and I'd click on Add Photos. And again, I can just tap on the photos in OneDrive here, and it will add them to the album and create the album for me. You'll notice that I use OneDrive for photos, and I also use Apple for photos. I'm just having photos sent up. I have 1 terabyte of storage with my OneDrive account, so I just have it sending up photos for me all the time and being able to do them. So I have the ability to do that. You'll also see a little share icon here that I have this. I can share a link to the album, and give people the ability with the link to be able to view it or change it. You can see it says My Albums. People can view it, but if I want to change the permissions, I can change the permissions for that setting and modify it so that people can add to that album as well. So those are some of the tools you have the ability to set that up for. I can manage access with these three dots. So I can change the view. If I have a photo that takes place a lot over time, I can have it done differently, but this manage access setting gives me the ability to control who has access to it. So I can manage the access to see who has access to it and give other people the access to it that I might want to. I can even delete the album, or I can rename it in a variety of ways. So by using this tool, inviting other people to it, add email to share with, I can give it people the capabilities. I can copy the link and paste the link in a message. If I want to send it as an Outlook message, it'll share the link in an Outlook email and give me the ability to give people the ability to look at that album right away from the link. So just some things to be aware of with OneDrive when you're looking at it. You have the ability, and here's my new album that I've got that I have available for people to look at. I want to create an album. So on the left, here is navigation for albums. You'll see an albums button, on your Google photo app in your phone. And so here's an album that I can create. I can create album. And when I want to create it, I can select photos. I can create an automatic updating album, but I want to add specific photos. Some albums, like on, you saw with Apple and others, they have tools that are available for you, and they will create albums of people and pets, very common types of things. And so I'm going to select from this computer. I'm going to take this photo. I'm going to take this one here. I'm going to take this one here, and we'll take one more down here. And I'm done. I'm going to tap done, and it's going to add these photos to the album. It's kind of nice. Google Photos on the web will give you a little hint here. It says, almost done, invite family or friends. It uses the share icon that Google uses, which is the three dots with an opening there. And you can select people by name, by email, and you can invite them, or you can create a link. Anyone with the link can see and share it. One of the advantages of sharing photos with three clouds, you have the ability to share them the most flexible way possible, depending on who the people are that you're working with. If you have a family and everybody's an Apple user, that's great. If you have friends and you have a mix of people that are Apple users and other users, that's another way to go. But if you have a resource that you want to share and you want to use a lot of different mechanisms for sharing photo albums, it's worth it to just get familiar with one. For the most part, people are not going to forward that link to an Apple iCloud album. They're not going to forward a link to a Google album, but you are making those photos public when you do share them by link. So always be aware of the fact that you have some control who can see those photos, particularly if they're family or friends or events, for privacy reasons. And so depending on which service you use will give you some of that control. And you can use them all on your phone. You can use them all on the web. You can use them all on a tablet. So you have access to your cloud photos. Your cloud photos will look the same and are be organized the same because your albums will sync up with your cloud, whichever one you use. So it's more a matter of albums are great in the first place. So I do recommend, if you aren't starting to use private albums, just you start putting photos in collections of albums. It'll make it really easy for you to find things when you're looking for them by just going to an album that you've created. Once you've created personal albums, you always have the option to share them with other people. When I was on my Backroads bike tour in Tuscany, a tour company created a Google Photos shared album, and it allowed us to add photos to it. They invited us by email to our Gmail addresses, and we were able to share photos and that each of us had taken at different portions of the bike ride. And obviously it's difficult to take a picture of yourself while you're riding a bike. So having someone else take a picture of you and being able to access that picture was really convenient. And people went and explored places we didn't know about. So for events, for groups, for clubs, for organizations, sharing photos through the cloud is a great way. And what's happening too now, I was talking to a friend at lunch today, is that he was saying he has trouble sharing photos as email attachments. And you may have discovered that if you try and share too many photos as an email attachment, the email is not going to go through. There's a limit, I believe, of about 25 megabytes of space that photos will let you send attachments. So if you have a lot of photos you want to share with people, you can't always send all of them by email, but with a shared cloud album, you can give people a link or send them an email and invite them to view hundreds of photos that you may want to have them look at and share them that way. So just something to look at, to consider, that you may not have thought about before. Using them with each of the services, it's really possible to have a lot of flexibility and a lot of fun. And by giving people the ability to share and view albums in the cloud, you don't have to worry about sending them an email with all the photos every time you want to invite a new person. You just have to add that person to the shared list, and they will have access to all the photos as well. Just remember, there's view-only permissions and there's view and add permissions, which is the primary thing to be aware of when you take a look at sharing photos in the cloud. Okay, so I thank you all, by the way, for being really great, at listening to me talk. I went a little bit longer today. I thought it was going to be a long topic, and I know there's a lot of things. We may have to do a follow-up and go into more in depth on Apple and Google and OneDrive, because they all work a little bit differently in both creating albums and sharing albums. But I wanted to just give you a good understanding that sharing albums is possible. It's not that difficult to do. Try it out. Create your own album, even if it's just adding one photo. But then start thinking about organizing photos, because organizing photos, like organizing files, becomes a real great benefit when you want to look at them. So thanks for coming today.